Are you a leader in customer success, pre-sales, professional services, support? Do you work behind the scenes and roll up your sleeves to make sure that customers are happy? Renew. Then this is for you. Welcome to the GSD Podcast. Welcome to the GSD Podcast. Getting it done. Services, success, and software. We'll talk with the pros that have been in the trenches, getting service teams off the ground, launching new types of groups to service customers, or running agencies that don't have a product attached to it. For the pros, by the pros. This is the GSD Podcast, and this is your host, Jeff Kushmerek.
All right, we are recording. Bob, you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'm here with Bob Lennon, and both of us are, I think, in the same stages of recovering from COVID, which will make this sound very much like an AM radio. I only wish it was like last Friday, because I had a real good boom in my voice with all of the stuff going on.
That people will have to play it at 3x speed just to hear it at normal speed because we're so slow.
That's funny because we've talked before and we're usually pretty fired up, but today's been a very very mellow. Was that SNL when there were the two ladies and they were just the NPR hosts?
That might have been the last time SNL was good.
Yeah, I would not know what it's like. Yeah, but that's how we sound old if we start doing that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's all good.
So you had a nice weekend of listening to the new Taylor Swift album all weekend long. Any favorite tracks?
I'm tired from staying up past midnight. Watched a lot of baseball. So I don't know.
Once the Red Sox are out, I don't watch it.
Well, but I don't know if all Bostonians celebrate this, but when the Yankees lose and get swept, aren't schools out today in Boston?
Oh, it's pretty much, it's a national holiday. It's amazing. It's like Columbus Day here. It's amazing. Yeah, it's true. Schadenfreude is what powers Boston. It's
one of my favorite.
We root for them to either fail or have career-ending injuries. It's just the way it is, So yeah, that's great.
I love it. I love that attitude.
You have to have it. So Bob, for the few people that don't know who you are, let's talk about your customer conversations, chief listening officers. Talk about your background and sort of how you now pivoted into this interesting world of customer experience.
Yes. First of all, thanks for having me.
We're just trying to keep it straight here. Bob and I usually can't have a conversation without cracking up. So
I've listened to your other, episodes, and it's really good. It's really real. And I know a lot of people talk about authenticity. It is one of the things I teach. So I appreciate the authenticity. So I am a career marketing guy and started out in something ancient called advertising and, made my way through as what turned out, I didn't understand this at the time, as a square peg trying to fit into a round hole in the corporate world in marketing and stuff, and did pretty well considering it wasn't really what I was good at or great at, and in terms of managing people and leading and stuff. Yeah. And hit some ceilings, got fired, and not before becoming an actual, at least in name, a chief marketing officer.
Got it.
And for a startup that had a life arc, which was like 11 months or something, during the dot-com bubble, the first dot-com bubble, not the one we're in now.
Was the 03 bubble? Was the 02, 03 bubble? Or?
No, it was before that.
Okay. Yeah.
It was 2000-ish.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so, but I learned a lot. I didn't learn enough about myself because when you get fired, you have a chance to rethink. And I didn't get the message that, sort of what was going on. And so, but long story short, it led me to an amazing place of being an independent marketing strategy consultant, which I loved. I was working with multiple companies, founders and CEOs at a given time. DC, where I'm based, Washington, DC, has a pretty strong, vibrant technology community. So I, got really plugged in there, and I thought I was just having a great time. as a fractional chief marketing officer. And by the way, I was not unsuccessful as a in the corporate world, and financially it was good.
Yeah.
But anyway.
You still didn't, sounds like you weren't as feeling fulfilled though, right?
I didn't, yeah, but so here's what I say. When you're, and I started saying this to I have two sons that are now in their early 20s.
Yeah.
When you're born, no one hands you an itinerary and says you're going to get good grades, go to a name brand school, get married, have kids, get a job at a name brand company, and be in business, quote unquote. But why do so many people feel like those choices have been made for them? And you just think about it before you do it, and maybe you're an individual. So after telling one of my sons that for a year and a half because of the situation he was in his journey, I realized I was talking to myself, and I had to be more accepting of individualism on all counts. So I didn't realize I was unfulfilled. I guess the point is, and I'll say this, when I talk to people who say, oh yeah, I was let go, the fact that they ended up talking to me, whether they like it or not, they're going to get the question of like, well, was it a fit? Like, are you blaming the employer for good reason? Was there anything you could have done differently? Were you doing what you were great at? Or, and people get uncomfortable sometimes, but they're usually happy that I force them to have that conversation, gently force. So, yeah, because it's never, look, I mean, consulting saved me. So I'll just say that.
No, same here. I think it's probably one of the reasons why we hit it off. I just realized that there was a point where, for me, I've been part of all these, like, just walked ass backwards into being part of some really successful companies. And then I would go join a company and they weren't on that path, and I would just kind of let it be known. And people were like, yeah, we don't want to hear it. So,
yeah.
But surprisingly, that works well as a consultant. Like, they want your background and understanding, right?
They want you to point things out. They want you to hopefully question things. Yeah, I 100%. Yeah. And by the way, I didn't realize you said that's why we get along. I didn't realize we got along. So thanks for letting me know. No, I was presumptuous at first, but then I thought, oh, it's nice. He likes me.
Oh, so, of course, Bob. You didn't know jerks on this podcast. I don't care how many followers you have. Right?
So anyway, as a marketing strategist, just briefly, so I would talk to these founders and CEOs, and I'd ask them some pretty basic questions. Why do customers buy from you? Why do they sometimes not buy? Why do they stay? Why do they leave? And they couldn't really answer. And I just started saying, this is ridiculous for us to be talking about actual marketing. Like, we need to go backwards, take a step back, and let me go do a listening tour of your customers. And that was something like 2,600 customer discovery conversations ago. So I started.
Now it's like 2678, right? Or I saw the counter in the corner. Was it 78?
I only updated after I.
Oh my God! It just went up again.
Yeah, yeah. So I should have a counter. Somebody will come along and say, that's not a very impressive number.
I've got 2852. So
okay, right, exactly.
Right. It's like the 6-minute ads, right?
Right. Yeah. So good analogy. So I found out that this is work I really, really love to do because it really made my clients more successful. I enjoyed asking more interesting questions and just listening and finding stuff out that led to better marketing strategies, positioning, value prop, all messaging, like, how do customers really think?
Right.
After doing that work for a number of years, thought I was really happy and up the value chain and all that. I was introduced to a guy named Jay Nathan, who we both know. And Jay said,
dashing and handsome man.
He is, actually. I think it might've been you posted something about that on the chat. Yeah, he is striking. He's a striking human. So he said, well, what you're doing, I know why you do it kind of behind the scenes in the whole marketing strategy, but we have, like, in customer success, we have thousands of conversations a week with customers that are not the right kind of conversation. And you could teach us. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, nah, not interested. But luckily I paid attention, and sure enough, that is now what I do. I teach teams, sales teams, and customer success and account management to have conversations with customers that are more sort of not about features and products, but above the line, all the stuff that's not defined that the customer thinks is important.
Right.
And the most satisfying work I've ever done in my career.
That's great.
By a long shot. Yeah, it's great.
It's such a need. One of my coworkers is this, where she says that people renew for two reasons, and one of them is that you're bringing value, right? I forgot what the other one is. No, I'm just kidding. But you need to be able to bring that value, and just reciting off lists of features and things like that is just, it's not going to bring that value. You bring that value by hearing what they're trying to do and then trying to solve it with your software, and then reminding them of that. 100%.
Yeah, I think most companies assume that their product is the value, and that they don't always stop and ask the customer. So, hey, we use the word value a lot, but what does it mean to you? Like, what does it look like for you? What would the perfect situation look like for you? And that led to some of these questions that I asked that, I think a lot of people have gotten value out of.
Yeah, there we go. And then you created the love languages, right?
Customer love languages. I didn't invent love languages.
Oh,
I stole
you're
them
not the
from.
guy? Wait, I got to talk to my agent here.
I know. I'm waiting for the lawyer to call. My lawyer. So the guy's name is amazing, actually. Gary Chapman wrote a book called The 5 Love Languages, and it's so brilliant what he did, and it's amazing how many millions of people he touched. So I was out in this CS 100 event, and I was going to give a talk called The 5 Customer Love Languages. And when I would talk to people about it, just kind of chatting, like, yeah, I'm going to be talking, and asking them to laugh at all the right places. And so many people not only had read the book or were familiar with it, but read the book, but they said, oh yeah, my love language is quality time. Like they're just volunteering it to me. And I've become, and I'm going to say for the record, I'm not great at this at home. I mean, I'm okay.
Well, the plumber's sink is always the leakiest. Right?
That's right. But at work, I'm an authority now. It's self-proclaimed. So yeah, so the love languages thing, and I think the way it landed in the CS 100 event what led me to believe that, we're onto something here as a group. Like, I'm not an expert on customer success. What I'm an expert is in the framework of how to get your customers to open up about what's important to them, which you can put into buckets called love languages.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm not coming at this from a patent infringement angle, but I used to use that every once in a while over the last few years. Like, you just got to know your customers' love language. I actually used it a little bit more facetiously because I'm like, here's a term that, we'll get some laughs and things like that, but it actually started resonating with people. Like, you're right, we do need to, but it's how we need to be able to understand how our customer likes to hear things. And
I claim no ownership. I mean, everything I do is kind of open sourced. And so I'm just using it as a hook. No, seriously. I mean, I'm not getting I'm not trying to get the domain name and stuff like that. I respect this guy.
Absolutely.
I respect this guy, Gary Chapman, too much. Now here's something I'll say. When you search for customer love languages, the first thing that comes up, it might be, I think it's a McKinsey article. And what these people do, it's almost like you can tell that it came, not McKinsey, but all the blog posts, customer love languages. It comes from, we talked about this before the session here. We have a content calendar. We have to fill it. What about customer love languages? And so they took the approach, which I don't like, which is they took Gary Chapman's 5 love languages and defined them in customer terms. It doesn't work. One of them is physical touch. Yeah. Like, hello, come on.
You mean your customers don't like that?
No, well, that's what I said in Utah, was like, that's kind of a hard no.
Yeah.
Receiving gifts.
A little touch on the ear, I think, works a little.
I'm not going to address that. Receiving gifts was another one. Like, no. Sometimes illegal. Right? So I rewrote them based on what I believe in my body of work and talking to tons of customers. I rewrote them, but so I'm not going to say it was lazy, but I sort of like, you just can't. You could take the concept and not steal this poor guy's 5 love languages and just write something.
You replatformed.
I did. It's like anyway, I'm not gonna, it's too long of a sidebar. It's a horrible story, but I'm not going to tell it right now.
Okay. Yeah. We can do those as the bonus Patreon notes. There's no Patreon.
Editing room floor.
Yeah,
Cutting room floor.
Do you mind just walking quickly, like boom, 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 through what the 5 of them are?
I do not mind.
Or is there a $13.99 charge I have to pay for that?
No charge. So here they are. In no particular order, but this is how I presented them. 1, be mindful. This is in the customer's voice. Be mindful of my time. And I can go back through any of these in more detail.
So don't have an hour meeting every week if there's no value.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'll tell you that we inflict QBRs on people. And by the way, CS doesn't like them either. You know, the old like. I mean,
this is a huge topic for a different thing. We just spoke about this on that panel, and we shouldn't be having unnecessary meetings that provide no value.
100%.
Yeah.
All you have to do is ask a customer, like, why do we think they're not engaged? Because, and Jeff Brunsback has also written very eloquently and effectively, I think, about this from Gain, Grow, Retain. So I'll give you one of my ideas or kind of best practices and one of his. Be mindful of my time means, don't just get into this sort of zombie-like quarterly rhythm because we said so. And then the content is sort of, we're here to help you, help us, you know, like what? and so we're going to talk about all the things that you need to do or that you could have done to get value if you're not already getting value. So one way that to do it is send the slides in advance. And what I like to do in my world is a little screen capture video that's 2 minutes, and it's a preview. Jeff's into this was send a one-page pre-read, and it's like, here's everything we want to cover, everything you need to know, and it allows both parties to zoom in quickly on what's most important and what needs to be discussed, as opposed to the pro forma stuff. To me, what that does, so these are, the love languages are intertwined. I don't want to move on before. So be mindful of my time. And the marketer in me will also point out, think about it as differentiation. Wouldn't you rather be the one vendor who says, by the way, you could say, by the way, not much going on this month, let's skip it. Or, by the way, let's cut it to half an hour. Don't just do an hour because your boss expects you to do an hour. And
also, so also on that note, like on the videos, just triggered something off that, say you're in that QBR or whatever, and they're like, hey, what are we going to plan for the next 3 months? What are our goals here? And people are like, oh, I'd love to see some more movement in this area over here, right? And then if suddenly 3 weeks later you're seeing some movement in that area, record a quick video, do quick loom or screen cap or whatever. Like, hey, this is what we talked about. It's going in the right direction. Look forward to seeing more in this. Boom, done. Like
100%. 100%.
Providing value.
I think the idea of time shifting, where they can watch that video at 8 p.m. if they want, or 8 a.m. They don't have to schedule. Look, scheduling calls is just out of control.
Yeah.
Which one of the other points I made was, it's not about time necessarily, but it has to do with, is what I'm asking the customer to do valuable to them or just me? And that is audio only. Now, I know you need to, when I do customer discovery calls, I realize there is no value. It's all ask, right? For me to say, okay, we're gonna have a Zoom call. I don't need to see their body language, and Lord knows they don't need to see mine because I'm hunched over taking notes and concentrating.
Yep.
And so I actually get customers thanking me, saying, I was just really excited to see this was audio only. They would thank me and I'd say, why are you thanking me? You're giving me your time. No, this is great. It also creates more of a confessional feeling to it. It's more intimate to remember, those of us old enough to remember being in a dorm and having a hall phone, a landline, and you sort of, Bobby, the phone for you, I think it's a girl, and you end up for the next 2 hours sitting with your back against the wall on the floor talking and totally immersed. There was no video.
Right. And then you had to say me too because you couldn't say I love you out loud. And then all your roommates would be like, say it, go ahead, say it.
That's actually hilarious. Really funny. Anyway, it comes back. Everyone says empathy, but that's a platitude. You got to bring it to life for customers. Be mindful of my time. That's the love language. That's one of them.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Shall I continue or do you want me to? You want to talk
You know,
about?
I'm going to link. Can I link to your slide share from this? I'm getting to some conversation points.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
That'd be great. Because I saw one when I was going through them where it was more of a conversation point, but it was about being agendaless.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, a counter to that is some people need the structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just, you think about your classic CSM, 20 to 40 accounts, opening up their CSP every day just to figure out what they should be doing because they're just, having a hard time navigating from it. So I feel that there's some structure that needs to be had. How do you do that in a way that's not in this like death march of going through that's besides just listing off the 5 of them, I wanted to get some more conversation
Good.
at that point.
So I think you raised the right point. This doesn't mean don't have an agenda. What it means to say is you should carve out points in the relationship where there is no agenda other than to let them talk about what's important to them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean, so I have a friend, one of my closest friends, a very senior strategic sales executive. And he says that all the time. He says, if you say agendaless one more time, you're going to lose me. It's sort of like in sales, you always have to have an agenda. But the challenge with that is so let's say that sales puts you through this rigid agenda and they're driving you
talking about let's be clear, 60-minute meeting, 57 slides.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like you're marching them down the path, and customers don't want to be always marched down the path. They want to talk. And they want to talk about what's important to them. And actually the number one buying criteria or buying influence, according to the RAIN group, pretty good sales consultancy, is just doing a better job at discovery.
Yeah.
Yet they rate sales as doing very poorly on that. And then the same with listening. And so by the time, let's say they buy, then they get to customer success and they still haven't been listened to. So who's going to listen? And it just means, so agendaless, yes, there's tons of stuff that has to be structured, tons of stuff that is, I would argue, a lot of it's kind of below that imaginary line that we have to talk about this. It's important, but there has to be some time. And I'll just point out that the first love language, be mindful of my time, helps free up time to help let you be agendaless during parts of the conversation.
Yeah.
So you don't always have to be driving through an agenda. It's exhausting.
No, absolutely. One of the things we were talking about, I don't know where it kind of falls into the 5, is this concept of the imposter syndrome. And people are afraid sometimes of having these open and real conversations because they're going to be like, oh my God, now kind of exposing myself, right?
Right. I think one of the things that I hear from customer success VPs or directors is, Bob, we want to do some kind of training. Our team is intimidated by the idea of asking questions about the customer's business. That in other words, asking questions that aren't about the product that we're pretty comfortable answering, we're asking. And I think that I understand it. I mean, I'm not dismissing that at all, but what I teach people is customers are not experts in your product. They're looking for you to teach. But when it comes to what are they experts in? Their business. So let's ask them about that. And that's when they really open up. And then it's okay for you just to be a student. Just ask questions, just be curious. And by the way, the younger you are, the earlier in your career you are as a CSM or account manager or in sales, the more the customer actually respects that you're curious.
Yeah.
Or prospect. Like, oh yeah, like this person really wants to learn. And so it's a good, this idea of being the student, like we're all taught to talk, but we're not really taught to be students of our customer's business. So I'm trying to influence that a little bit. So it's you asked a great question.
Giving this framework for better questions and conversations, essentially.
Better questions that don't put your customer or prospect to sleep. Like what keeps you up at night? It's these cliches that require no effort to ask. And it just, the customers zone out. You got to wake them up a little bit with one of the questions would be, if I could sneak into your board meeting
Yeah.
What do you think is the number one thing that they're talking about? And it's just engaging, and it shows the customer or prospect that you're not there to just be typical. You're just not there to be typical, and you're there to understand things that maybe other vendors aren't trying to understand. And again, I go back to that differentiation counts for a lot between vendors.
Right, because some of the times, especially in the sales aspect of things, but the features could all be pretty similar, right? Oh, okay, great. Platform A's got 15 features that I need, and Platform B's got 13 of those, but 2 other ones that I need, right? Like, there's not that much differentiation sometimes. So it might be into that. I like the way that they ask questions, and then be able to come back with a value conversation of, this is how you would use us. You'd be able to get this amount versus like, oh, we've got this feature, we've got this reporting, we've got X, we've got Y.
Yeah, I think that there is a dirty little secret in the tech startup, especially community, is like ours is the best widget, and we need to position and sell it as such. And the reality is that it's like the Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched. And when you're in sales and you take that, what is all spun up to be an amazing value prop and unique differentiator, you take it out into the market and you get punched because people are like, yeah, it sounds like this or that. And you could talk all you want, but once you've fallen into that mental map that they have, you've lost an opportunity to really, then you have to explain. And I don't know who said this, I love it. Once you have to explain, you've lost. Yeah. If you can't grab them. And that's why asking questions first about what's important to their business, it allows you to do something very important, which is positioning. How do you position your solution, either pre-sale or post-sale, in a way that means something to them in terms of budget and prioritization?
Absolutely. One of the reasons why, because I've got the languages up in front of me that I kind of didn't want to dive too much into, because you're right, they're all kind of intertwined, right? You've got being in sync with me, being contextual, being real, and curious about the company. I feel like we've kind of gone over a bunch of those concepts. Mm-hmm. One of them I love that's not, what would you classify it? Because it's on your slide, but it's not one of the love languages, I believe, which is do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, so I was going to bring that up. So the way I present this is, here are the 5 customer languages. And what I say to an audience is, there's something on here that's missing. What is it? It's obvious. And so then I build that little yellow smiley face that says, do what you say you're going to do. And the reason I do it that way is because I'm really trying to focus on the love languages that are in the above the line, the unspoken, unexpected stuff. The do what you say you're going to do. If I have to teach you to do that, then you got big problems. Like the product, make sure the product works the way it's supposed to. Duh. Support. Are you responding quickly? Are you, do you have the right kind of training materials and links or whatever, are you adding some value based on what you told them? That's all stuff that's in the licensing agreement. It was in the pitch. It's written down. It's obvious and explicit. You have to do what you said you're going to do. And that is table stakes. Yep. If you're not doing that, then these other 5 love languages aren't really going to work for you. But I'm glad you highlighted that, because it could make me look like an idiot if people see the 5 love languages above the line and then they say, well, what about the product? Well, the product is the thing that should be working. You got to get that working before you can start adding value.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
No, I 100% get it. Absolutely. What do you feel, because you're going around and you're talking with all these companies, like what is the actual biggest problem when you're dealing with CS companies? What is the actual, when we're talking about these, we've gone over all the sort of love languages and everything, but what are the behaviors that you find are not happening the most here? If you looked at all of those there.
I think being curious about my company. So that's, again, in the customer's voice. Like the number of times that when I ask these more interesting, disruptive questions of a customer and they thank me at the end, like, no, Bob, we can, we're wrapping up 29 minutes into into a 30-minute conversation. This is
after you walk on the hot coals, correct?
This is after I walk on the hot coals.
Okay.
And I start to wrap up, and it's like, do you have time for one more? Or, thanks for your time. And they say, no, this is important. I can give you another 15 minutes. And then at the end, they thank me. Why? Because they say, because nobody's asking us these questions and they're important. So I think if all you did was to just be more curious about the customer's company, not their department, not their job, all important, but what's going on. That's why that board question, it's just so disarming, because it just says, wow, they're really interested in what's going on at a higher level. And it's self-serving. I mean, it helps us help them.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the one that I think is look, I mean, I said, we talked about, I didn't call it, I say that cobbler's children have no shoes. You talked about plumbers having cracks or something. No, you said the plumbers stopped up sinks. Yeah, that, there's so many different ways I could position and market my content, but the one thing is, be curious about the customer's company, and it's such a wedge into the conversation that gets them to open up. It's terrific.
And so that might be, it sounds like, if you were to do one thing, that one sneaky hack that the doctors don't want you to know about, like it'd be.
Yes, because everything else on here, be mindful of my time, be in sync with me, be contextual, be real. Those are things I think we could all agree are important. And they just happen to fall into buckets that I call love languages. But being curious about my company is probably the freshest. And to your question, it's the hardest, I think, to get teams to adopt, partly because they don't have time, partly because they're intimidated to ask questions at a more strategic level about the company. But again, take the pressure off yourself, ask the question, and just be a student. You don't have to teach them something at that moment.
Got it. And when you're training other companies on this, if somebody brings you in there, are you then working with their teams? Are you giving them materials? Are you working with them over a multi-week period? Like,
yes.
Just curious, because if people are asking, like, this sounds interesting. Like, what does that look like if people are like, hey, we're not doing any of these things, we should get Bob involved?
That's kind of you to ask. I do a deep dive. Everything starts with this deep dive. Here's what customers really believe. You're not listening enough. We collectively are not listening enough. It's important. Here's what comes out of it when you do it right. Here's some disruptive questions. Here's how to listen once they open up. Basically, I call it $TFU. Like, it looks like.
Oh, it's your business card. I've got one.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
And it's like how to just shut up and let them talk about what's important. So that takes 90 minutes to 2 hours. But the cool part is at the end, I say, okay, and I want you to get out your phones or your calendar, and I want you to write down 3 meetings you have coming up in the next 2 weeks. And I want you to identify which 3 meetings, customer meetings, you're going to ask a couple of these questions and why, and which questions you might ask. And just take 10 minutes, write it down. Then they have a plan.
Yeah.
And then I say, great news, you get to execute that plan for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks, we're going to all get on the phone together again on the Zoom, and we're going to go around the table, virtual table, and you're going to tell me how it went. You can play me a clip of the call recording. You can just talk about how it went, but you're going to talk about how it felt to ask these questions that are a little disruptive and unusual. You're going to talk about what you learned. You're going to critique what you might do differently next time. And then we're going to go around the table, and everyone else is going to have a whack at giving you constructive feedback. And then I'm going to give you constructive feedback. So we can do 3 to 4 of those per hour. So if it's a team of 20, it might take, 5 weeks, but that's really where the hook gets sunk. I don't know what
well, yeah, because you need the repetitive behavior. So
well, just I think people say, like, aren't we going to do role playing? No, I would take any ounce of energy that goes into role playing and say, just go out there and talk to your customers and do it in real life. And 9 times out of 10, CSMs or CSRs that do this find out that it's actually more fun for them than the way they've been doing it. So that's why I really want them to try it, is because it's more interesting and fun. And if you survey them and you say, what do you want to do? What do you want to do differently about your job? And they say, I want to just be more strategic. I want to have more of an impact. Great, here's your chance. And so it aligns well with, individual goals and team goals as well.
No, that's awesome. It's probably a good place to leave off before jumping into something else because I'm cognizant of the time here. Also, you hear some massive vacuuming going on behind me, so I'm not sure.
I can't hear anything. I actually can't.
Usually, if I record
Need a better
podcast,
microphone.
That's somebody's cue to print something on the printer next to me, or for the landscaper who's come over next to me.
Jackhammer. Jackhammering
But,
appointment.
exactly, that's going on a couple doors down. So I'm not getting. So where we previously were asking about what was your big COVID thing. I'll turn it into it's the leaves and the trees are getting pretty and falling down. And what's your big winter thing that you've got planning that you're gonna do while you're all bunkered inside? Is it pickleball? Is it like what are you planning on for the winter?
We are fortunate to have a property a couple hours from here it's not on the ocean, but it's a few miles away from the beach. And I'm really looking forward to spending time there with my wife, and maybe our kids will stop by, like just hanging out, because it's an investment property. So it's rented a lot during the high season. And I don't need to be there during July 4th anyway. It just drives me nuts, the crowds. So I'm looking forward to that, and probably have to paint a little, but I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to bought my first real bike, and I'm looking forward to using that bicycle, not motorbike.
Yeah.
And just stuff like that, Yeah. And here it doesn't get as bad as it does in Boston. And so I'm just looking out the window. I'm looking forward to being outside and stuff.
That's great.
I was in Boston in the winter at MIT, walking across that bridge.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. I might have been the coldest I've ever been.
There's a reason why that's like what sports teams used to do that for hazing and everything. Yeah. That's terrible.
Woo. That was brutal.
Great. Well, Bob, just thanks so much for being open with your time here, especially since you're through your convalescence. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you giving me something to do. No, you're a natural interviewer. It's not even an interview. You're a conversationalist. And I think that's a great skill. And I can see why you're successful because of it. It's just, it's so effortless for anyone in this seat to be talking to you. And I really appreciate that. In addition, of course, being smart about what you do. It's just really nice. And that's really good.
Can I play that back for my kids? Because I'm just a guy who doesn't know how to do their geometry.
I'm happy to talk to your kids anytime about I'll talk about how great you are.
Okay. Listen, hold on one second. We're going to wrap up here. We're going to put links to all your stuff in the call notes. I'm going to put it on for your LinkedIn, but what's the if somebody wanted to go one place,
oh yeah,
see what we're talking about, what would you suggest?
Strategic Customer Convos, CONVOS.com.
Got it?
Yeah,
Awesome.
man. Yeah.
Hold on one quick second and we'll wrap up here. That's great.
Yeah, thank you.